Welcome. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. With me today is Chaplain Lisa Northway, U.S. Army. Thank you for being here, Chaplain Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
You know, in all the roles that you've had over the years as chaplain, you've been pouring yourself out as a servant of God to be present to and help a lot of people. You've talked about during the deployments, really the 24/7 nature of your assignment, even though you weren't in the combat itself. Your support role required complete devotion to duty at all times. What have you done over the years? What do you do to allow yourself to be refreshed spiritually and to stay spiritually strong? How do you maintain your God connection so that you don't become too depleted and burn out?
Certainly, there's a lot of layers to that. I think that in a combat situation, realizing that the spiritual combat is way more intense. It's way more real in some ways, which is hard to. I can imagine where our listeners might think that, well, how can spiritual combat seem more real if people, men and women, are dying around you? But there's something about when you understand we may have a common enemy in the physical world, but we absolutely all have the same enemy to our soul, it is his mission to kill, steal, and destroy anything good that God has placed in you and upon you, in the image of God, even on us, makes us a walking target, literally, for that enemy. And knowing that, there's certainly some things proactively I did. Certainly before I leave, I want my loved ones to gather around. Anytime anybody says, "I'll put you on our church prayer list or my community list," thank you. I want that. I remember that my original hometown of origin, family Modesto, that some of the little old ladies who were not so old as when I was young had still gathered for prayer, and they found out that I was going to Iraq, and they said, "Well, we want to pray with you. We want to be your prayer covering. We're gonna gather." And I was just like, "Oh my goodness, these are the ladies who taught me in Sunday school and that I looked up to, and they're coming and they're praying for me. They know me. They knew me as a child. Maybe they wondered what God would have me to do. Certainly none of them, and neither they would ever dream that God would have me go where he's sent me and be who he's allowed me to be." And I would say, the prayers of strangers, people who I've never to this day met, some of them who I've got to meet, like yourself, who signed up for that duty, that's so essential to our well-being, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to get up and face the unfathomable day after day, hour after hour. And sometimes it's not about getting up because you haven't been to bed.
Right.
For sure.
Do you read the Bible every day? Do you have special prayer times? How do you do that in a combat zone? How do you stay close to God yourself? Because we can pray for you, but then you've got to stay close to him yourself too. So how do you do that?
I think the days blur together so much that I can't say for certain if I read the Bible every day. I was in it. I was praying it sometimes over my soldiers. Mostly a lot of prayer time with soldiers, with another spiritual battle buddy, that person that I would not have chosen. I wouldn't have chosen any roommate. And I didn't. It's not typical. You have to have one, but I was in a situation that God saw fit that someone who was getting the opportunity to go back from the land that she had fled on foot. I mean, they had a car, but initially had to flee through the mountains of Turkey to get to Greece and eventually come to America, and was taken from her teaching position in classroom. That was the day they realized they could never go back, as she was dragged by her hair. And she still has long, beautiful hair, even as an older woman. And for her to come back to the privilege of helping her newer American comrades come as a civilian, put a flak vest, combat vest, and go out with my commander, and be his interpreter. And then her coming back and her pouring out her heart and she say, Chaplain, she said, I just went outside the wire, and I see now this. I went to the same area where I was a teacher, and what Saddam did in 30 years took back our country 300 years. And the grief she would share, but we would come together and make room for joy and light. And she was the one. There was only one window in our room on the first part, and it was on my side. And she was so hungry for light, and she'd say, and I'd be sleeping still, and she'd whisper, Chaplain, man, it's okay if I open the curtain and let in the light of God.
Oh, beautiful.
In her broken English.
Beautiful.
I said, yes, Miriam, you can go ahead and let the light of God in. Even because I was going to keep sleeping if I had any moment at all to sleep. But thinking about those times and the bittersweetness and the sweetness of God's light and joy and compassion for each other and his people, letting that ride over the bitterness of what we saw, of just the way some people were treated, some people were neglected, that couldn't do better for themselves or those that they had deployed with, and helping people hang on. And I would say it was the prayer. It was getting to, yes, I shared scripture, and we had Sunday services, and they were joyous, and there was the music. We had music that carried us. Those I remember certain CDs I would play in my room on my own, even I didn't have the strength to read or open my eyes in exhaustion, but I could press play and to let the worship music come over me, and let that be a gift. Let it restore my spirit, so I would have something to give when I walked out my door.
Yes, exactly that. So he provided exactly what you needed. Mm-hmm. He provided the people, and then he provided a means which was easy for you to just let yourself soak in, let the music wash over you.
Yes. So critical.
So when you got back from Iraq, what came next?
I had arranged with my husband that I knew, because of all that I had seen and endured and had impacted me, that I needed to be in a place where I could freely tell my story to a counselor, a therapist, somebody who'd been a chaplain. And we knew of somebody, and my husband went with me. I wanted my husband to go with me because I didn't want to be repeating that story in its totality over and over again. I knew that I need to be able to have a place to bring the story and leave it there. Even as I'm telling now, there's certain bits and pieces over time. I needed to just say, let's just do this all and talk about this year. Certainly, I think it was over a few sessions, but the first main session. And for my husband to hear the things that I couldn't tell him over the phone, even though he knew quite a bit and was warring for me in prayer and actual inquiries of why is this chaplain assistant who threatened my wife's life being returned to her? The question that any spouse, any family member would ask. He had been doing that, and he was just torn inside at what he heard and knew that I was going through. And And we do tell our sometimes our family members things because we want them to know if we don't come home alive, this is probably going to be the reason. Because the leadership doesn't know what to do with this person.
That's a horrible thing to have to report.
And so while I'm deployed, he's, asking hard questions and people not sure what to say. And so having my husband be with me in that space to tell that story was really helpful and healing. I didn't need him to say a lot. I just wanted him to hear it as it just spilled from my heart, and all the things that go with that, and it was enough for the first day. It was enough for the first week. What was really remarkable is I knew this because understood this concept that I've always believed that anything that you hold on to in your heart, such as unforgiveness, if it's there long enough, it will eventually show up on your face, in your body, in your mind. And I've always, kind of in a lighthearted way, said, I'm just vain enough that I'm going to go to a therapist. I'm going to go get pastoral care and counseling myself so that it doesn't get to my face. So I can still be as beautiful as I want to be, or as I can be at any age. And I'm going to do that internal work. And really, in part, that's what I was doing. I knew it would benefit me none. But I could easily, if I didn't do the work, I could have that residue that grows up and grows and becomes ugly. And I was not going to allow the enemy that kind of terrain to work with in my life. And what was so amazing in that is, and then you don't expect also that you can't expect you'll get resolution because of the legal battlefield leaders that no one's going to admit to anything that they don't have to deal with. And I remember, though, we had a formation before everybody was allowed to go on block leave after we'd gone through our reintegration and our minimum standard of getting what we need to do and unloading. That Sergeant Major coming to me and this was completely unexpected. And I remember him right after formation ended, he walked up to me, he said, Chaplain, I just want to apologize to you.
My goodness.
And I was kind of surprised. I said, Sergeant Major? He said, I feel like I could have been more supportive of you during the mission. I said, sir, I don't have anything in my heart or my mind that against you that would make me feel like that was something you should have done. That's just so you know. I know we all have issues to work out and resolve as we come home, but you're not somebody in my heart or mind that I'm going to be working through the forgiveness issue with, just so you know. And he said, well, I'm thankful. He says, but I definitely think that I could have done better. And he explained a few points where he felt he could have been a better Sergeant Major. And I was like, just amazed. And he said, and Chaplain, don't expect to get an apology from anybody else. It's not going to happen. And I said, yes, Sergeant Major, thank you. And that was so healing to me.
I bet.
This was not somebody who professed to be this, seasoned, strong Christian. He'd had his own battles. He had his own betrayals downrange that greatly impacted him, that he struggled with. And I thought, this man has humbled himself. As grisly as Sergeant Majors are known to be, he's humbled himself, really, under the oak tree, like an oak tree counseling, like they call it, as in the earshot, even though anybody could hear, of other soldiers, and apologized. And I'm thinking, I remember saying that to somebody, and they said, I think it might have been the counselor therapist. He said, Chaplain Northway, Sergeant Majors never apologize. you need to consider it a remarkable thing that you received an apology from your sergeant major.
Incredible.
And I don't think I think I've come back to I probably need to let him know again how healing that conversation was, because he gave me more spiritual permission to heal. It's like, and he was very confident. Not that I wouldn't not accept it, but he was very confident. He's, you won't accept. You won't be getting any more apologies from anyone else, but I'm going to give you one right now.
Yeah.
And it was just this beautiful yet gritty apology for whatever was going to happen.
I think you dispel a lot of the myths that service members already know, that when you come home, there's still more work. That it's not just come home, get off the plane, get off the bus, and back to ordinary non-deployment status. Mm-hmm. That there's processing, and that you brought some things home with you.
I certainly feel like that was really critical. That was so helpful to my mission as a chaplain. My calling is my soldiers did not see me escape anything horrific that they had to go through. They truly knew I was with them every step of the way. And what's beautiful about that, because we intend that in that witness of Emmanuel, God with us, is for them to really not see us, but to see that God stands with them in that horrific place. And even if they didn't have an experience like me, where I could sense the flapping of Jesus's robe on my own Via Dolorosa, they saw Chaplain Northway with them, flapping about, at times maybe ungloriously, but she was still with them. And the chaplain who went with them came home with them. My hope is that translates to the God who went with them, or the God they adopted as their father.
Yes.
Is also the God that went home with them and is still with them every time they call upon his name.
What a beautiful image and prayer. Thank you, Chaplain Northway. We'll talk to you next time.